Good day, everybody. We're going to talk about infectious diseases. We're going to talk in this lecture on infectious diseases in two parts. First, the principles, and second, some examples of infectious diseases. Infectious diseases principles. The infectious disease model consists of: first, the host; second, the pathogen; and third, the environment. Definition of infectious or communicable disease is an illness due to a specific infectious biological agent or its toxic products capable of being directly or indirectly transmitted from man to man, or from animal to man, or from animal to animal, or from the environment through air, water, or food to man. Infection is the entry and development or multiplication of an infectious agent in the body of man or animals. An infection doesn't always cause an illness. There are several levels of infection, which we call the gradients of infection. First, the colonization, like for example the Staph aureus in the skin and the normal nasopharynx, or there may be subclinical or inapparent infection like in poliomyelitis, or there may be a latent infection like the virus of herpes simplex, or finally we get a manifest or a clinical infection and an overt disease. The host is the person or the animal that affords subsistence or lodgment to an infectious agent under natural conditions. Types of host. The host can be an obligate host, which is a host where the infectious agent cannot live independently of this host. The definitive or primary host, in which the infectious agent attains maturity, and the intermediate host, in which the infectious agent is in a larval or asexual state. And the transport host is a carrier, in which the organism remains alive but does not undergo development. The vector of infection. The vector of infection is an insect or any living carrier that transports an infectious agent from an infected individual or from its waste to a susceptible individual, or to its food or the immediate surroundings. The vector can be biological or can be mechanical. Biological, when the infectious agent matures and transfers from one class in the life cycle to another, while the mechanical, where the infectious agent remains in a single stage of the life cycle. Incidence and prevalence. Incidence of an infectious disease is the number of new cases in a given time period, while the prevalence of an infectious disease is the number of cases, all cases, new and old cases at a given time. Incubation and latent periods. The incubation period is the time from exposure to the infectious agent till the development of the signs and symptoms, till the development of the disease, while the latent period is the period between the exposure and the onset of infectiousness. Nosocomial infections or hospital-acquired infection is a new infection originating in a patient while he is in hospital or in any other healthcare facility. Examples include infection of surgical wounds, hepatitis B, and urinary tract infections. Opportunistic infections. Infection by organisms that take the opportunity of a defect in the host immunity or to infect and thus cause a disease. It's very common in AIDS. The organisms include herpes simplex, cytomegalovirus, mycobacteria, tuberculosis, and others. Dynamic or the dynamics of disease transmission, the chain of infection. First, we have a source or reservoir. Second, we have modes of transmission that will take the infectious agents from the source to the susceptible host. We call this the chain of infection. So we have the infectious agent living in a reservoir, and on the other side we have the susceptible host. And in between we have the modes of transmission. And we have the exit portal of the infectious agent from the reservoir, and we have the entry portal of the infectious agent in the susceptible host. The reservoir. Types of reservoir. First, the reservoir is any person or animal or arthropod, insect, or a plant or soil or substance or a combination of all these in which an infectious agent normally lives and multiplies and can then be transmitted to a susceptible host. It is the natural habitat of infectious agent. Types. We have a human reservoir, animal reservoir, and non-living reservoir. The human reservoir can be a case, a patient who has a disease, or can be carrier. The animal reservoir are responsible for a group of diseases that are transferred to man from animals, which we call them collectively zoonoses. The non-living reservoir can be soil or any inanimate matter. The case, human reservoir. A case is a person having clinical disease. A carrier is an infected person or animal that harbors the specific infectious agent, but in the absence of a visible clinical disease and serves as a source of infection to others. The carrier state is either due to inadequate treatment or inadequate immune response. The disease agent is not completely eliminated. Animal reservoir are responsible for a group of diseases we call zoonoses, which is an infection transmissible from animals to man, and we have over than 100 zoonotic diseases, for example rabies, plague, and bovine tuberculosis. Reservoir in non-living things like the soil and inanimate matter. Soil may harbor agents that cause, for example, tetanus or anthrax. Modes of transmission, either direct transmission or indirect transmission. Direct transmission when there is a contact between the source of infection and the susceptible host through direct contact, through droplet infection, contact with the soil, inoculation into the skin or the mucosa, or transplacental from the mother to her baby. Indirect transmission can be vehicle-borne, and vehicle is inanimate or non-living means of transmission, or vector-borne, and the vector-borne like insects, which are animate or living vehicles, and this can be mechanical or biological. Airborne infections, fomite-borne infections, and unclean hands and fingers. So we have a direct transmission through contact, and we have the indirect transmission through fomites, through food, water, biological products, through the air, or through vectors. Thank you very much.